But here's the thing. Europeans will actually start coming to China. And this helps lead to what I call the second missed opportunity, right? So Europeans are going to start coming to China. Leads to what I call the second missed opportunity. So in Europe, science is developing, right? Even in the 16th century, we usually think of the scientific revolution as a 17th century thing. Even in the 16th century, Europeans are doing some good things with science. Now, science has a complex relationship with religion. Sometimes when people talk about history, they want to make them enemies. Other people respond to that by trying to make them friends. And what I will tell you as a historian who studies religion is that it depends on what type of religion we're talking about and when we're talking about. And of course, people within a religion, even the same religion, can disagree. So I want to emphasize, we'll talk more about this later, there's a complex relationship with religion and science. One thing I want to point out, though, just as the Chinese wanted to develop a good calendar, just as they wanted to use astronomy to predict eclipses and comets and things like that, Christians wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to be able to correctly calculate when holy days were, for example. So one thing about Christianity was it, and we're talking about specifically Catholicism right now, is there was a desire to understand astronomy. And it's interesting, a lot of early observatories were actually built on top of churches because they were tall. Now, there was a man named Matteo Ricci, who was a Catholic missionary. He was a part of what's called the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. And he went to China as a Catholic missionary, wanted to try and convert Chinese to Christianity. And you can see in that picture, in many ways, he did this in a way that respected China, right? You can see he started to dress like a Chinese person. He tries to present Christianity in a Chinese way. You can see there's a Chinese-style picture of Jesus and Mary in the back, and Chinese the Chinese language back there is explaining Christianity. So Ricci's going to go to China. He's going to try and convert Chinese to Christianity, but he has to figure out how he's going to do that. And he has a lot of different ways he's going to do it. But one thing he tries to do is he tries to convert the Chinese through science, right? He wants to convert the Chinese through science. And his basic kind of argument is, look, Christians were good at astronomy, and that's about heaven, right? The heavens. And obviously, if we know about the heavens, we know about heaven, we know about God. And I want to tell you that there is a Lord of heaven, that there's a God that rules heaven, and his son became a human being, Jesus Christ. And that's basically how they kind of made this argument. They tried to say, we're good at science. Here's our science. Look how awesome it is. So you should believe in Christianity, because obviously if we understand the true workings of the universe, we also understand true religion. Now, some Chinese accepted this. That's one of his converts right there next to Matteo Ricci. A lot of Chinese didn't. A lot of Chinese said, we like the science, but we'll leave the religion alone. But in any case, the key point I want to make is these missionaries are exposing Chinese people to European science. Chinese are getting access to that, and they could have gone on to develop a scientific revolution similar to what Europeans did. So, and that's an image. That's another that's another missionary to China, another Jesuit. I believe that's Adam Shaw. And you can see he's posing there with astronomical instruments, and he's actually wearing the uniform of a Chinese official. So remember, Chinese were really interested in astronomy. They wanted to have a good calendar, because a good calendar is necessary for knowing what days you should perform rituals. For example, you need to know the equinoxes, I should say, to perform the rituals you're supposed to do on those days properly. You also need to predict comets and eclipses in order to show that you have the mandate of heaven. All that requires astronomy. So the Chinese were really interested in Western astronomy because it promised to help them make better calendars, predict comets and eclipses better. And of course, that helps show that you have the mandate of heaven. All that requires astronomy. That's great. European missionaries are bringing in modern astronomy. That's good for China. And I want to stress, this opens up a possibility. One thing that's kind of curious, the scientific revolution helps lead to the industrial revolution. And early science started with astronomy typically. And you may say, well, why is astronomy important for building machines and things like that? And the answer is that to do astronomy right, you need math. Once you get good math, you can apply it to other things like engineering. Once you understand engineering, you can build machines. And the Industrial Revolution is all about machines. So I want to stress, By exposing the Chinese to astronomy, they're exposing the Chinese to something that could lead to a scientific revolution and eventually an industrial revolution. So, but this is what I call a second missed opportunity. Why? Because the Chinese empire just hires Jesuits to do that work, right? Just like Adam Schall there, he's a Catholic missionary, but he's going to be working for the Chinese in the Astronomy Bureau, right? So instead of saying, this science stuff is amazing, let's push it further, the Chinese empire says, hey, these Jesuits are good at astronomy, let's just hire them and they can teach a few Chinese people how to do astronomy, we'll be good. So what this means is the Chinese are going to stay just limited at astronomy and mathematics. They're not going to go on to develop engineering and machines and things like that. Or complex machines, I should say. They did have machines, just not complex ones. Why did they do this? Why didn't the Chinese see the importance of modern science in this time period? Simple. They emphasized moral knowledge over technical knowledge. The idea was Confucianism and the morality it taught was what held the empire together. It's what kept stuff stable. It's what made the empire great. And all those things are true, right? The Chinese had good reason for believing it because it's all true. But the problem is that's what they focused on and didn't take into account the importance of technical knowledge, right? They just hired missionaries and some other Chinese to do it. But if you really wanted to be powerful, if you really wanted to be wealthy in Chinese society, don't become a scientist, become a government official. That means studying Confucianism. So science is always going to be far behind Confucianism. It's just not seen as valuable. The Chinese had good reason for this, but this will mean that they will fall behind. And even though they are exposed to modern Western science, they're not going to be able to launch a scientific revolution. If you don't have a scientific revolution, you don't have an industrial revolution. And I want to give you one last kind of image that I think really shows this. Matteo Ricci, he wanted the Chinese emperor to give an official proclamation recognizing that Christianity was a legal religion, right? He wanted Christianity to be recognized as a legal religion that could be practiced. And that meant he had to give tribute to the emperor. He had to give the emperor a gift to show that Christianity was good, that he was a good person. And imagine how hard it is to buy a gift for your parents, right? I hate buying gifts for my parents because they have more money than me and they can just buy whatever they want. And imagine buying something for the emperor of China. That's really hard. So what Matteo Ricci did, though, was he gave the emperor a clock. And you can see a model of the clock he gave the emperor there on the left. And the Chinese, even though in the ancient past they actually built clocks, they had forgotten how to do so by this time. And so they were just amazed at this machine that could operate on its own and that could keep the time, right? All you have to do is wind it, and it will keep going and going and going. And then it was set up with bells and things that would chime on the hours. And this was really impressive. And the emperor loved this. And he would issue a proclamation legalizing Christianity and saying how awesome Matteo Ricci was because he loved this clock. So it worked. But from our perspective, you look at that clock and then look at the steam engine on the other side. Don't they look really similar? Again, this could have been something the Chinese could look at this and said, oh my gosh, these Westerners are awesome at making clocks. These things are cool. Let's learn how to make them. And hey, let's advance on them. Let's try and make better ones. But they didn't do that. Right? The focus is just simply on, hey, this is kind of a neat toy, but moral knowledge is important, not this technical knowledge. Don't worry about studying it. It doesn't really help you. But as we can see here, knowledge of how to build things like clocks would give the Europeans the skills necessary to build things like steam engines, and that gives them a lot of power. So, like I say, China had a couple opportunities to go out and explore, to get scientific knowledge, to have a scientific revolution. They didn't. They had good reasons for not doing so. But in the end, they didn't, and that will help allow the Westerners to kind of pull ahead of them.